There was a law in the Ironwood Pack, ancient, absolute, written in blood and enforced with death. No wolf may touch the plagued. It had kept us alive for 300 years, kept the red fever from spreading, kept whole packs from being wiped out by the sickness that turned blood to fire and bones to ash. When a wolf contracted the plague, they were taken to the dying grounds, left with water and blankets, watched from a distance, but never touched, not by healers, not by family, not by mates. To touch the plagued was to die. Everyone knew this. Everyone accepted this. Until the Alpha King's nephew contracted the fever, until I broke the law, until everything changed. Chapter 1. The cub, his name was Kale, 4 years old, dark hair, gold eyes that had been bright with mischief just 3 days ago, or now they were dimmed with fever, glazed with pain, staring at nothing. He lay in the dying grounds, a clearing ringed by silver birch trees, their white bark gleaming in the fading light. Beautiful in a terrible way. Peaceful. A place to die alone. I crouched in the brush at the clearing's edge, watching. I wasn't supposed to be here. Omegas had no business at the dying grounds, but Kale's mother, the Alpha King's sister, had begged me. "Please," she'd whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please just watch over him. I'm not allowed, but you could. No one would notice an Omega. Please, I can't let him die alone." So, I came. I'd been here for 2 days, watching this small boy suffer, watching him cry for his mother, for water, for someone to hold him, and I could do nothing. The law was absolute. To touch the plagued was death. But gods, it was hard. Harder than anything I'd ever done. To watch a cub whimper in pain and not go to him. To hear him call for mama and not answer. To see him reach out with small, feverish hands and not take them. The sun was setting now. His breathing had changed, shallow, rattling. This was the end. He was going to die. Tonight. Alone in this beautiful, terrible clearing, and I was going to watch it happen. Kale's eyes fluttered open, found the sky, the first stars appearing through the birch branches. "Mama?" His voice was barely a whisper, cracked, desperate. "Mama, it hurts!" My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "I'm here," I wanted to say. "You're not alone. I'm right here, little one." But I couldn't. The law. Death for touching. Death for crossing that invisible line that separated the dying from the living. Death for showing compassion. I'd watched others die here. Seen cubs cry themselves to sleep. Seen adults beg for water just out of reach. Seen the light fade from eyes that kept searching for family that would never come. The law was absolute, and I'd always obeyed it. Always stayed in the brush. Always watched without acting. Until now. "Please," Kyle whispered into the darkening sky. "Please, someone. I'm so scared. I don't want to be alone. I don't want..." His small voice broke on a sob. "I don't want to die alone." Something inside me broke. I thought of my own mother, dead 5 years now. I thought of the last thing she'd said to me. "Be brave, little one, but never so brave you forget to be kind." I thought of every law, every rule, every tradition that had brought us to this moment. A 4-year-old dying alone because we were too afraid to hold him. And I decided. Some laws deserved to be broken. I was moving before I made a conscious decision. Before fear could stop me. Before common sense could intervene. Crawling through the brush. Through blood-stained leaves where other plagued had died. Through earth that smelled of sickness and sorrow and 300 years of enforced cruelty. Toward the cub. Toward death. Toward the only choice that mattered. I heard shouting behind me, guards who'd been watching from the outer ring. "Stop!" She's crossing the line. Someone stop her. I didn't stop. I reached Kyle, knelt beside him. His skin was burning. Fever hot. The plague mark, dark veins spreading from his chest, pulsed with sickly light. "Hello, little one," I whispered. His gold eyes focused on me, confused, hopeful. Are you real?" "I'm real." I touched his forehead, felt the killing heat. "I'm here. Mama said no one could touch me. She said," his voice broke, "she said I had to be brave, had to die alone. You don't have to be alone." I gathered him into my arms, careful of his fragile body. "I'm here now." He sobbed into my chest, small, broken sounds. "It hurts so much." "I know, sweetheart. I know." "Am I dying?" The question no child should have to ask. "Yes," I said honestly, "but not alone. Never alone." Footsteps thundered toward us, multiple guards, and underneath their heavy tread, something else. Something that made every wolf instinct I possessed scream danger. Alpha, not just any alpha. The alpha, King Theron Ironwood himself. I looked up. He stood at the edge of the dying grounds. 7 feet of lethal muscle and absolute authority. Silver hair pulled back in a warrior's knot. Eyes the color of winter storms, gray and cold and merciless. He carried a spear, silver-tipped, the traditional weapon for mercy kills, for executions. "Step away from the cub." His voice was death itself, cold, final. "You've broken sacred law. Step away and face your punishment." "No." My arms tightened around Kale. That wasn't a request. "I don't care." I looked down at the small boy in my arms, at his gold eyes watching me with something like hope. He's dying. He's terrified. And I won't let him die alone just because your law says I have to. The law protects the pack. The plague. I know what the plague does. I met his eyes. And I know the risk. And I'm taking it anyway. Theron took a step forward. The spear gleamed in the dying light. "Then you die with him." "Fine." I pressed my lips to Kale's forehead, a gentle kiss, a promise. At least he won't be alone. The cub made a small sound. Relief. Gratitude. His small hand found mine, held on. "Will you sing?" he whispered. "Mama used to sing, before I got sick." My throat closed. What did she sing? The moon song. I knew it. Every wolf knew it. The lullaby mothers sang to cubs, the song that promised safety and love and pack. I started to sing. "Hush now, little wolf, the moon watches over thee." Kale's breathing eased slightly, his grip on my hand relaxed. "Sleep now, precious one, beneath the silver tree." Theron stood at the edge of the clearing, so spear raised, watching, but he didn't throw. "The stars will guide you home, when darkness fills the night." Kyle's eyes were closing, the pain leaving his small face. "The pack will keep you safe until the morning light." His breathing grew softer, slower. I held him close, let him feel warmth, feel comfort, feel loved. "Dream now, little one, of hunts beneath the moon." His hand went slack in mine. "The ancestors call you home. You'll see them very soon." One last breath, small, peaceful, then nothing. Kyle was gone. I sat in the dying grounds, holding a small body that would never grow up, never laugh, never run with the pack, never live. And I didn't care that I'd just contracted a death sentence. I didn't care that the Alpha King stood 10 feet away with a spear aimed at my heart. I didn't care about anything except the fact that this cub had died hearing a lullaby instead of dying alone and afraid. "He's gone," I said quietly. Theron's jaw tightened. "So are you." He stepped into the dying grounds. Every guard sucked in a breath. The Alpha King, entering the plagued zone, breaking his own law. He crossed to me in 3 long strides, raised the spear. I didn't move, didn't look away, just held Kale's body and waited. The spear descended. Fast. True. Aimed at my throat. It would be over in seconds. I closed my eyes. The spear struck dirt, inches from my neck. So close I felt the wind of its passage. So close it split hairs, but not touching. I opened my eyes. Theron stood over me. The spear quivered in the earth beside my head, buried deep in the dirt. So close it had split hairs on my neck. So close I'd felt death pass by, but not touching. His face was a mask of shock, of disbelief, of something I couldn't name. His voice was rough, shaken. Nothing like the cold execution I'd expected. You're sent. He dropped to his knees beside me, moved so fast it should have been threatening. But his hands, when they grabbed my face, when they cupped my cheeks with desperate, trembling fingers, were infinitely gentle. He inhaled deeply. Once. Twice. Like he was trying to confirm something impossible. His eyes went wide, storm-gray irises blown dark with shock. Impossible, he breathed. You can't be. We can't be. Then I felt it. The thing I'd been too focused on Cale to notice before. Too consumed by grief and song, and a cub's final moments to sense what my wolf had been screaming since Theron entered the clearing. The mate bond, snapping into place like a physical blow, like lightning striking through my chest, like a rope pulling taut between us, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. It stole my breath, made my heart stutter, made every nerve in my body light up with recognition. Mate, mine, ours. But I was dying, plagued, contaminated from the moment I'd touched Cale. And he was the Alpha King, untouchable, powerful, the last wolf in the territory who should be kneeling in the dying grounds, holding a doomed Omega. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now. Not like this. Not with a dead cub in my arms and plague in my blood and... You're my mate. Theron's voice was wonder and horror mixed together. My fated pair. And you're dying. He pulled me against his chest. Kyle's body still between us. Why? His voice broke. Why did you do this? Why did you break the law? Why did you throw your life away for a cub who was already... Because he was scared, I said simply. Because he was 4 years old and dying, and calling for someone to hold him. Because your law is cruel. Because sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that gets you killed. I looked up at him. I'd do it again, I said. Even knowing this. Even knowing you're my mate. Even knowing I'm going to die. I'd do it again. Theron stared at me like I was something he'd never seen before. Then he stood. He lifted me, still holding Cale, into his arms. What are you? Taking you to the healers. His voice was steel. You're not dying. I won't allow it. The plague can be fought. If treatment starts early enough. If the wolf is strong enough. If they have a reason to fight. He looked down at me. And you're going to fight. Because you're my mate. Because I just found you. Because I'm not losing you the same day I discovered you existed. Your Majesty... One of the guards stepped forward. The law! She broke. The law, Theron said coldly, ends tonight. No more dying alone. No more leaving cubs to suffer in isolation. No more... His voice cracked. No more of this. He carried me past the stunned guards, past the dying grounds, toward the healing halls. What about Cale? I asked quietly. Will be honored, buried with full ceremony. His mother will be allowed to mourn him properly. Theron's arms tightened around both of us. You gave him that. You gave him peace. You gave him love in his final moments. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't save him. No, but you made sure he didn't die alone. That matters more than you know. Chapter 2. The Healing. They put me in isolation. A room in the healing halls with silver-lined walls that reflected lamplight in cold, sterile patterns. Guards posted outside my door. Protection for the pack if the plague took me. Prison if I survived. The room smelled of medicinal herbs and fear. I was the first person in living memory to touch the plagued and live long enough to be quarantined. Usually those who broke the law were executed immediately. Clean. Fast. No risk of contagion. But I was the Alpha King's mate. So they gave me a chance. 3 days. That's what the healers said. If I lasted 3 days without the plague mark spreading too far, I might survive. Most people didn't last one. Theron visited every day. He shouldn't have. The risk of contagion spreading through the royal line. The scandal of a king visiting a lawbreaker. The fact that I'd broken sacred law and technically should be ash by now. But he came anyway. The first time I barely recognized him. The fever had already taken hold. I was burning, sweating, seeing shadows that weren't there. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I tried to focus on his face, on those storm-gray eyes, on the concern I didn't deserve. "Like I'm dying," I said honestly. My voice came out as a croak. "You're not dying." He sat beside the bed, took my hand despite the healer's sharp protest, despite the risk, despite everything. "You're fighting, and you're winning." "How can you tell? Because you're still arguing with me." A slight smile. "The plague doesn't leave much fight in people, but you've got plenty of fight left." The second day was worse. The plague marks had spread from my arm up to my shoulder, dark veins like black lightning across my skin. The healers whispered, made notes, prepared me for the possibility that this was the end. Theron came anyway. "Tell me about Cale," I whispered through the fever. "Tell me about him. Before." Theron's face softened with grief. "He was wild, full of energy." My sister said he never stopped moving. He never stopped asking questions. What was his favorite thing? Stars. Theron smiled slightly. He loved the stars. Would make everyone go outside at night to count them. Said he was going to visit them someday. Tears leaked from my eyes. I'm sorry I couldn't. You gave him peace." Theron's hand tightened on mine. "You gave him comfort. You made sure his last moments were filled with love instead of fear. That's everything." On the third day, I woke up feeling different. Still weak, still sick. But the fever had broken. The plague marks had stopped spreading. The healers called it a miracle. Theron called it stubbornness. "I knew you'd survive," he said quietly. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. "I knew because you're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm not strong. You risked death to comfort a dying child. You held my nephew when I couldn't, when his own mother couldn't." His voice broke. "You gave him what we all wanted to give and weren't brave enough to risk." He pressed my hand to his heart. "That's strength, Nessa. Real strength. The kind that matters." I looked at our joined hands. "You shouldn't be here. The risk. I'm your mate. Where else would I be? We barely know each other. I know you risked death to comfort a dying cub. I know you sang him to sleep. I know you held him so he wouldn't be alone." His thumb stroked my hand. "That's all I need to know. But the law, I broke. A law I'm changing." His eyes were fierce. "Because you were right. It was cruel. Necessary once, maybe. But cruel. The pack will object. The pack will adapt." He leaned closer. "Or they'll learn what happens when they try to stand between me and my mate. Theron, I searched for you for years. 30 years I've ruled alone. 30 years waiting for the mate bond to snap. And it finally does. With a woman who's dying because she has more courage than my entire royal guard combined." He pressed his forehead to mine. "So no, I'm not leaving. I'm not letting you die. I'm not losing you. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice." His eyes held mine. Fight. Please, fight to stay with me. Chapter 3. The Trial. I survived. Not easily, not quickly. But after 2 weeks of fever and pain and dark veins spreading across my skin, I survived. The healers called it a miracle. Theron called it stubbornness. I called it luck. Whatever it was, I woke up on the 15th day fever-free. The plague marks fading. Weak, exhausted, but alive, and immediately arrested. The law states that any wolf who touches the plagued must be executed, Chancellor Aldrich said coldly. Your Majesty may have found his mate, but that doesn't exempt her from justice. The trial happened 3 days later. I stood before the full pack council, still weak, still recovering, but standing. Theron sat on the throne. His face was a mask, but I could feel his fury through the mate bond. Omega Nessa Ashwood, the Chancellor intoned, you stand accused of breaking sacred law, of touching the plagued, of entering the dying grounds, of risking plague spread to the entire pack through your reckless actions. How do you plead? The council chamber was packed. Every ranking wolf in the territory, every family who'd lost someone to plague, every guard who'd watched me cross that line, they all wanted to see justice, wanted to see the law enforced, wanted to see an example made. I met the Chancellor's eyes and spoke clearly, firmly, without regret. Guilty. Gasps rippled through the council, through the assembled crowd. Someone in the back let out a shocked curse. You admit it? The Chancellor looked genuinely surprised, like he'd expected me to beg, to make excuses, to plead ignorance. You admit to willfully, knowingly, deliberately breaking the most sacred law of the Ironwood Pack? I broke your law, knowingly, deliberately, with full understanding of the consequences. I met his eyes. Let him see I meant every word. A 4-year-old cub, the Alpha King's nephew, was dying alone and terrified. Your law said I had to let him suffer, said I had to watch him cry for comfort I wasn't allowed to give, said I had to let him die, believing no one cared enough to hold him. I let my voice carry through the chamber, so yes, I broke it, and I'd do it again. I'd break it 1,000 times, because some laws are wrong, and watching children die alone is wrong. The Chancellor's face went red. The law exists to protect. I know why it exists, I interrupted. I know the plague spreads through touch. I know isolation saves lives. I know the numbers, the calculations, the cold logic. I stepped forward. But I also know that Cale died with someone singing to him, someone holding him, someone telling him he was loved, and that mattered more than your law. Murmurs swept through the chamber, some angry, some thoughtful, some agreeing. Then you accept the penalty? The Chancellor's voice was hard. Execution? Death by spear for violation of sacred law? I accept that I'll face consequences for my choice. I looked at Theron, at my mate sitting stone-faced on the throne. But I don't regret it. I never will. The Chancellor turned to the king. Your Majesty, the law is clear. She must. The law, Theron said quietly, is changing. He stood, descended from the throne. Omega, Nessa Ashwood broke a law that was written 300 years ago. A law designed to protect the pack from plague. A law that, at the time, was necessary. He walked to stand beside me. But that law had an unintended consequence. It made us cruel. It made us watch children die alone. It made us value survival over compassion. He took my hand, and this woman, my fated mate, showed us what we'd become. She risked everything to give comfort to a dying cub. She held him, sang to him, made sure his last moments were filled with love instead of fear. He turned to the council. And for that, You want to execute her? The law can be changed, will be changed, is changing right now. His voice was iron. I'm issuing a new decree. The plague law is amended. No more dying grounds, no more isolation. Plagued wolves will be quarantined, yes, but they'll be cared for, touched, comforted. They'll die with dignity, with love, with pack. Murmurs erupted through the council. Your Majesty, the risk is manageable. The healers have developed new protocols, as better quarantine procedures, ways to care for the sick without risking mass infection. Theron's eyes were fierce. We can be safe and compassionate. We don't have to choose. He turned to me. And as for Nessa's punishment, he smiled. I'm claiming her as my mate, my Luna, my queen, and anyone who has a problem with that can face me directly. Alpha Command rolled through the chamber. Every wolf went still. She broke the law to save a child from dying alone, Theron said quietly. If that's a crime, then I don't want to rule a pack that punishes it. He pulled me close, motioned to dismiss all charges. All in favor? Silence. Then slowly, hands raised, one by one, until every council member had voted, even Chancellor Aldrich. Motion passes, the Chancellor said stiffly. The Omega is cleared of all charges. Theron pulled me into his arms. You're safe, he whispered. You're mine, and you're going to help me change this pack into something better. Epilogue. 6 months later. Kyle's mother found me in the memorial garden. I visited every day. The new garden we'd built for those who died in the plague. A beautiful place. Peaceful. Full of silver birch trees and moonflowers. Kyle's name was carved in stone, along with hundreds of others. Thank you, she said quietly. I turned. Lady Sarah stood there, the Alpha King's sister, Kyle's mother. For what? For being with him, at the end. Tears streamed down her face. I couldn't. The law. But you did. You held my baby. You sang to him. You made sure he wasn't alone. She pulled me into a fierce hug. You gave me the only gift that mattered. You gave me the knowledge that Kale died, loved, comforted, at peace. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. You did save him. She pulled back, looked me in the eyes. From dying afraid, from dying alone, from thinking no one cared. You saved him from that. She touched the stone bearing Kyle's name, and you changed everything. The law, the pack, how we treat the sick, how we honor the dying. She smiled through tears. My son's death meant something because of you. I didn't know what to say. She kissed my cheek. Thank you, Luna. Thank you for being brave when the rest of us were too scared. She left. I stood alone in the garden, looking at Kyle's name among the others. Theron found me there as the sun set. Still visiting? He asked gently. Every day. I leaned into him. Is that morbid? It's remembering. It's honoring. It's making sure they're not forgotten. He wrapped his arms around me. That's what a good Luna does. I'm not sure I'm a good Luna. You're the best Luna this pack has ever had. He turned me to face him. You changed us. Made us kinder. More compassionate. Better. I just did what was right. Exactly. He smiled. That's what makes you perfect for this. He knelt, pressed his hand to my stomach. And our cub is going to grow up in a pack that values compassion as much as strength. That protects the weak instead of abandoning them. That lets the dying be comforted instead of isolated. I touched his hair. You really think we can change things? We already have. He stood, pulled me close. Because you were brave enough to break a cruel law, to risk death for compassion, to show us a better way. He kissed my forehead. That's the pack I want to build. One where wolves like you are honored, not executed. Where kindness is strength. Where dying cubs are held, not abandoned. One where the Alpha King's spear strikes dirt instead of killing, I whispered. One where the king recognizes his mate through her sacrifice, he agreed, and spends the rest of his life making sure she knows she was right. We stood together in the memorial garden as stars appeared. Theron, Nessa, the cub growing beneath my heart. A family built on broken laws and sacred compassion. A pack learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to let someone die alone, even if it costs you everything, especially then.